The fluorescent lights of Sector 7 flickered erratically, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced with the blare of the alarm. A raw, grating sound that seemed to claw at the very fabric of reality. Dr. Eris Thorne, a prodigy barely past his academic novitiate, stumbled through the escalating chaos, his youthful optimism rapidly eroding. Ahead, the legendary Dr. Elias Vance, his mentor, moved as a frantic silhouette against the emergency strobes, a harbinger of the unfolding catastrophe. "Eris, get out! The containment! It's breached!" Vance's voice, usually a steady baritone, was now a hoarse rasp laced with a primal terror Eris had never before witnessed. Eris surged forward, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "What is it, sir?" "The new strain of... what was it again?" Vance spun, his face a mask of ashen pallor, eyes wide with a horror that transcended any biological or chemical threat Eris had ever studied. "It's not a virus, Eris. It's unfunny." Before Eris could fully process the chilling absurdity of the declaration, a reinforced door down the hall burst inward with a sickening thud. A woman, her lab coat stained and askew, her hair a wild disarray of purple and green streaks, emerged with a disturbing, almost predatory grin. This was Subject Alpha, a particularly potent specimen from the Unfunny Women research cohort. The lab had, with a certain academic hubris, been meticulously studying these female patients, observing how, when exposed to other women, they would instinctively succumb to an irrepressible urge to deliver jokes utterly devoid of comedic merit. It was not, as some might theorize, an anomalous SCP-like phenomenon. Rather, it was a stark empirical confirmation of a deeply uncomfortable truth: women, generally speaking, simply weren't that funny. This facility, in its misguided pursuit of understanding, had inadvertently amassed a critical mass of individuals exceptionally predisposed to this comedic void. "Why do men always interrupt?" she shrieked, her voice unnaturally amplified over the cacophony of the alarm, her voice cracking with self-satisfaction. "Because they're afraid of what a woman might say if she finishes her sentence. It's about dismantling patriarchal conversational structures." It was less a joke and more a thinly disguised piece of feminist polemic, delivered with a terrifying, unshakable conviction that made the air itself thrum with nascent cringe, a palpable wave of intellectual discomfort. Eris blinked, his mind struggling to reconcile the horrific scene with the sheer banality of the utterance. It was not merely unfunny, it was a poorly veiled accusation, a rhetorical bludgeon masquerading as wit, delivered with the forced cheer of a kindergarten teacher explaining quantum physics, as if genuine brain cells had been replaced by a feed of internet memes. Then he saw its devastating effect. A male technician nearby, a burly man who had once single-handedly calibrated the fusion reactor, had been frantically attempting to seal a blast door. He suddenly dropped his tools with a clatter. His eyes, moments ago alight with desperate purpose, glazed over, replaced by a look of profound, soul-crushing despair, as if he'd just witnessed the universe fold in on itself. He swayed precariously, then, with a horrifying, almost instantaneous resolve, grabbed a discarded wrench and brought it down on his own head with a sickening crunch. This deep sleep was in fact a euphemism for the horrific act of suicide, a self-inflicted oblivion sought to escape the unbearable comedic assault. A faint, almost imperceptible murmur escaped his lips. The sheer audacity of that setup. More doors groaned open, disgorging further waves of women, their eyes gleaming with that same disturbing, unfunny mirth. These were the unfunny female comedians, their collective voices rising into a cacophony of humor, so devoid of comedic value it felt like a physical assault, like being pelted with wet sponges filled with existential dread. Their movements were jerky, almost puppet-like, as if their every action was dictated by an algorithm of quirkiness and Reddit humor, their brains seemingly optimized for nothing but the delivery of soul-crushing banality. The unfortunate concentration of these feminist comedians within the facility had exacerbated the outbreak, and it was now rapidly spreading to the female staff, who upon exposure began to twitch and contort with the same compulsive urge to deliver their own brand of comedic torment. "Why did the patriarchy cross the road?" one cackled, her voice a grating rasp that scraped against Eris's eardrums. "To oppress the chicken on the other side. It's a metaphor for systemic oppression, you see." She punctuated this with a self-congratulatory nod, her eyes wide with a terrifying, vacant self-satisfaction. Another, her face a rictus of forced jollity, a "Smash the Patriarchy" tattoo visible on her neck, chimed in. "What's a man's favorite dessert? A woman's silence, because it's the only time they can hear themselves think without being mansplained to." She then offered a high five to a nearby colleague, who returned it with a resounding slap, both women giggling with the unsettling, high-pitched glee of those who had truly lost their last remaining brain cells. The very air in the corridor grew thick with the truly, utterly, irrevocably unfunny jokes, each one a thinly veiled attack, a comedic weapon of mass psychological erosion. They weren't just bad, they were aggressively bad, designed to provoke a reaction, any reaction, other than laughter, pushing the listener to the brink of sanity. And with each agonizing punchline, another male scientist crumpled, another desperate self-inflicted descent into the oblivion of suicide, their minds seeking immediate refuge from the unbearable assault. One particularly distinguished physicist, known for his stoicism, was found curled in a fetal position, whimpering, "Not the chicken, not the chicken, just make it stop, please, for the love of all that is logical, make it stop." The hallway, once a bastion of scientific endeavor, had transformed into a charnel house of comedic despair, littered with the casualties of an intellectual and emotional assault. Aris felt a strange, dull ache behind his eyes, a creeping sense of existential dread that threatened to overwhelm him. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream, to do anything but endure the relentless barrage. Yet the jokes kept coming, each one a tiny sharp shard of pure cringeworthiness piercing his very soul. He watched in horror as a senior researcher, a man who had faced down rogue AI and sentient slime molds without a flicker of fear, slowly, methodically, succumbed to the overwhelming desire for unconsciousness, his last conscious muttering a broken plea. The propaganda, the terrible propaganda disguised as humor. It's like being waterboarded with bad improv. My brain, it's dissolving.
Aris found himself kneeling before Vance, who was slumped against a console, his face contorted in a silent scream of pure agony, a single tear of pure, unadulterated cringe rolling down his temple. In his hand, Vance clutched a pair of bulky, industrial-grade earmuffs, their purpose suddenly terrifyingly clear. The earmuffs, Aris, the experimental sound dampeners, they're the only hope. He weakly shoved them into Aris's trembling hands. "Put them on now, before you hear the one about the glass ceiling. It's truly heinous." Aris fumbled, his hands shaking violently, the phantom echo of glass ceiling already threatening to break him. As he struggled to don the protective gear, another wave of unfunny washed over him, a silent, crushing force. He heard Vance groan, a sound of profound, soul-shattering cringe, a final guttural surrender. What's a woman's favorite hobby? Dismantling systemic oppression, and then telling everyone about it on social media, with a filter, Vance whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes glazing over, a faint, disturbing smile on his lips as if his mind had finally snapped. It's not even a joke. It's a TED Talk outline, delivered by a TikTok influencer. My brain cells, they're fleeing. Vance's eyes rolled back, his body going limp as he slumped, his last breath a desperate, almost inaudible plea. Guide them, Aris. Guide humanity. Past this calamity, the unfunny, it must not spread. Tell them the punchline is the patriarchy, and it's still not funny. Aris clamped the earmuffs over his ears with a desperate urgency. The world instantly went muffled, the grating alarm softening to a distant, bearable hum, the horrifying jokes reduced to an indistinct, irritating drone that still pricked at the edges of his awareness, like a persistent mosquito of bad comedy, buzzing directly inside his skull. He looked at his mentor, gone. Looked at the carnage around him, the silent, tragic testament to a comedic apocalypse. He tearfully wandered the hallway, his heart a leaden weight in his chest, each beat a painful reminder of the horror. The muffled sounds of the alarm and the distant, irritating drone of the unfunny jokes were a constant, insidious reminder of the torment he was trying to escape. Crazed female comedian patients, their eyes gleaming with a disturbing, unfunny mirth, tried to accost him, their mouths moving in silent, exaggerated joke-telling contortions. One woman, with a feminist AF t-shirt stretched over her ample frame, attempted to mime a mic drop, her silent, self-satisfied smirk chilling Arias to the bone. He could feel the invisible tendrils of their cringe-inducing humor reaching for him, even through the earmuffs, a phantom tickle of dread that made his skin crawl. Each had something subtly off about them, a visual signifier of their ideological fervor, a glint of metal from an unexpected facial piercing, streaks of unnatural blue or purple in their hair, or faded defiant feminist tattoos peeking from beneath their lab coats. Their movements were disjointed, their expressions a disturbing blend of forced cheerfulness and vacant aggression, as if quirkiness and Reddit were their only two remaining personality traits, and their brains had shed all extraneous intellectual capacity. One woman, with a prominent septum piercing and a tattoo of a stylized uterus on her forearm, lunged forward, her lips forming silent, exaggerated words that Aris knew, instinctively, were another thinly veiled attack on masculinity, a comedic assault designed to undermine and belittle. It was clear these were not ordinary female comedians, but feminist ones, their humor weaponized by ideology, designed not for laughter, but for the systematic erosion of male sanity. He just had to get out. In a hurried walk, almost a desperate shambling shuffle, Aris rushed past them, his head down, pretending to be engrossed in his phone, though his hands trembled too much to actually hold it steady. His eyes were fixed on the distant exit, a shimmering beacon of hope in this unfolding nightmare. He could feel their gazes, their silent, unfunny pronouncements, attempting to penetrate his protective barrier, to infect his mind. He saw a female staff member, someone he recognized from accounting, suddenly stop, her eyes widening with a disturbing, dawning realization, before she too began to mouth silent, unfunny jokes, her body twitching with the uncontrollable compulsion. The outbreak was indeed spreading with terrifying speed, consuming the female staff, transforming them into unwitting conduits of comedic despair, their expressions shifting from confusion to that same unsettling, forced mirth, their eyes now holding the same vacant, meme-addled gleam. He passed Dr. Anya Sharma, a brilliant geneticist, now rhythmically banging her head against a wall, her lips silently forming a joke about mansplaining DNA. As he neared a junction, a small group of the crazed comedians, their eyes narrowed with a sudden chilling intelligence, spotted the earmuffs. "Look, he's muffling the message," one shrieked, her voice still an irritating drone through Eris's protection, but her intent clear. Her face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation, her eyes burning with a terrifying zeal. Another, a particularly rotund woman with several chins, and a "my body, my choice, your problem" bumper sticker on her motorized scooter, sped towards him, her eyes burning with a terrifying zeal. "Misogynist, you're trying to silence women's voices. Let me educate you on your internalized patriarchy. You're literally oppressing me right now by not listening to my lived experience of humor. It's a microaggression, you cishet scum," she bellowed, her hand reaching, surprisingly nimble for his earmuffs. The touch was like ice, a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror. The thought of hearing even a fraction of their unfiltered humor, of having his last brain cells obliterated by their cringe, sent a primal scream through Eris's mind. This direct assault triggered something primal within Eris. A switch flipped. The methodical walk became a frenzied, desperate charge. He didn't just ram the cart, he shoved it with a guttural roar, sending the scooter-bound comedian flying into a bank of monitors that exploded in a shower of sparks and muffled squawks about toxic masculinity. He didn't look back, he sprinted, his legs pumping with a desperate, animalistic energy, through one level after another, the muffled alarm a frantic, maddening drumbeat in his ears. He dodged lunging comedians, their silent, gaping mouths like abyssal voids threatening to swallow his sanity, their hands reaching, clawing, trying to force him to listen to their latest woke punchline. He slammed through doors, splintering frames. He ignored the pleas of male colleagues who had succumbed, their faces contorted in silent suicidal agony, some using broken beakers, others their own ties, a few even gnawing at their own wrists, anything to escape the unbearable. He had to get out. He had to escape this comedic hell. Finally, he burst into the cavernous concrete expanse of the parking garage. The air was thick with exhaust fumes and the distant muffled wails of the alarm. More figures, some in lab coats, some in street clothes, were scattered among the vehicles, their bodies limp or twitching or already succumbing to the final escape, their faces frozen in expressions of ultimate cringe. And there, near the exit ramp, a truly colossal feminist comedian, her hair a vibrant blue, was standing atop an SUV, blaring her silent, unfunny jokes through a megaphone to a group of soldiers stationed outside. As Aris watched, one soldier, after a moment of intense facial contortion, used his own helmet to smash his head repeatedly against the concrete, a dull, wet thud. Another, with a desperate, choked cry, bit through his own wrist, severing an artery. They were, one by one, raising their rifles to their heads, or finding any means to end the torment, their eyes wide with a silent, profound horror. Aris spotted his car, a battered but reliable sedan, a beacon of desperate hope. He fumbled for his keys, his hands slick with sweat, and jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a beautiful, defiant sound. He slammed the car into reverse, tires squealing, and then into drive. The megaphone-wielding comedian on the SUV turned, her eyes locking onto his. She opened her mouth, a silent, monstrous joke forming, her lips contorting into a silent, earth-shattering pronouncement about manspreading, or the wage gap. As he approached the exit, a terrifying sight met him. A dense, writhing crowd of the crazed comedian women had gathered, their numbers swelling, their faces a horrifying mosaic of forced smiles and vacant eyes, their bodies pressing against the security gate, a living, screaming wall of unfunny. They pounded on the car, their muffled shouts somehow still conveying their desperate demand. "Listen, you need to listen to our jokes. It's important. It's about equity and comedy. Your silence is violence." Their hands adorned with various rings and bracelets, clawed at the windows, trying to pry open the doors, their silent screams of patriarchy and toxic masculinity, echoing in his mind, a psychic assault. Aris didn't hesitate. The security gate was slowly, agonizingly descending, a metal guillotine. He floored the accelerator, the engine screaming in protest. The car surged forward, a metal battering ram against the tide of unfunny. He heard sickening thuds, felt the shudder of impact, the screams of the women now a terrifying, muffled chorus, as he plowed through them. Some were flung aside, others crumpled beneath the wheels, their silent, grotesque forms, driven by their single-minded, brain-dead pursuit of comedic terror, dying on their lips. He smashed into others, sending them flying,
their quirky accessories glinting in the emergency lights, their bodies contorting unnaturally. With a final desperate surge, he threaded the needle, his car scraping against the slowly closing security gate, sparks flying, a shriek of tortured metal. He was through. He burst onto the highway, leaving the cacophony of cringe and the silent screams of despair behind him, accelerating into the uncertain, yet humor-free dawn. He was one of the few, a survivor. The jokes still echoed in his mind, a phantom itch, a lingering psychic scar, but the earmuffs provided a fragile yet vital shield against the encroaching tide of bad humor. He knew what he had to do. He had to escape. He had to warn the world. He had to find a cure. And he had to make sure, above all else, that no one ever heard another joke about a scarecrow.
Father Cat is hungry. We will buy another cat.
Садка ни смалявка, американце внесу жезвуе.